Worley is here on the Marketer of the Day podcast, who accidentally perfected the second home brokerage business model in the worst real estate market in history. So Jeramie is going to be telling us about these things called STR, short-term rentals. Jeramie is the CEO of Vrolio, whose flagship data tool Investor is the only B2B solution in the short and mid-term rental sectors. So Jeramie has $1 million in short-term rental transactions brokered and closed lifetime. He's the published author of Myths, Management, and Mastery of Vacation Rentals, and he is the host of the acclaimed Cocktails and Dreams Real Estate podcast. So we're about to speak with real estate developer Jeramie Worley to tell us about what we need to know about real estate, how to up your game, rise above the noise, etc. So Jeramie, glad to be speaking with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on your show. And actually, was gonna. Sounds like you were kind of reading that, and it's actually $1 billion of short-term rental acquisitions. So I earned all that. It was a lot of sweat and a lot of people screaming, and so I just wanted to be sure I got credit for all that. For
Right.
all
And
that
as I
stuff.
was saying the billion, I was like, did that come out as million? But I
Yeah,
meant to say billion, but sometimes the words mess
that's
up. So,
okay.
but it's okay. Like, yeah. So $1 billion, like, what does that translate to as far as like units, properties? Like, about how much is that?
Well, billion is the new million, right? And so just to give you an idea, in 2021, I think that was our peak year. We did almost 1,000 transactions that year. It was 900 and some odd. It was absolutely crazy. So
Yeah, that is crazy. It's mind-boggling, but that's why you're here, because we want to learn from the master, learn from the
sure.
best. And so, yeah, we gave a little bit of introduction about you, but in your own words, what's your current passion, focus? What just gets you jazzed up, excited these days?
Sure. My current focus right now is helping real estate agents and real estate investors really increasing their net worth through real estate investing. We use the short-term rental asset class as a gateway drug, so to speak, to real estate investing, because I find that a lot of people, in my experience, have that analysis paralysis, or there's just sort of a lack of courage to get started in real estate investing. It seems to be that education is the largest barrier to entry there. And a lot of people also feel like they don't really know how to do it. There's like so much to think about, so much risk. And so they don't know how to get started. And really, the best way to get started is to jump into a short term rental, because you don't really have to know all about flipping and remodeling and the latest trends and backsplashes and carpet or whatever. It can be daunting to walk into a property that's a deal property and find termites or just fleas or what all the things that happen when you're looking for foreclosures or deals, when in fact all you have to do is know how to go on vacation. You have to know what you want when you go on vacation. You like a clean place, you like clean water, you like enough plates to be able to feed your family, proximity to attractions. You need some wow factor, and as long as you have that, you can really start with a short-term rental asset class and win people over in a way that you can kind of see that monthly reoccurring revenue just ticking in. And of course, we guide people on how to analyze those properties before they buy them. That's the cool thing about real estate, is that you actually get to analyze that first year rate of return, before you buy it based on past market conditions. You can't always do that with stock or some other type of investment or 401k. And frankly, short-term rentals are one of the most fun asset classes out there, because you can't really take your 401k statement to the beach and hang out with it, but you could go hang out in your property with your family at the beach and have an amazing time.
I love it. Yeah, there's a lot of upside to it, and I think you're so right that there's this analysis paralysis. Like, there's so much to access as far as information wise these days with real estate, but then that's a double-edged sword, right? Because then you can just go down all these rabbit holes and end up more confused than when you started. And I do get frustrated when you hear about these real estate guys saying, "Hey, your first transaction should be a 72 unit apartment building," and I'm thinking like, okay, well, I get how that makes sense. Or they say things like have like storage rentals or commercial real estate, and all that sounds like being married to this idea for decades.
Oh
And
my
it
gosh.
seems, yeah, it seems like so scary. And so as far as this whole short-term rental thing, you also hear a lot of like the horror stories there. So why is short-term rentals, besides what you just mentioned, but why is short-term rentals better than some of these other kind of enticing options?
Well, I would say you're going to have horror stories no matter what asset class you get into in real estate, just because human beings are involved. The worst thing you could possibly do is purchase a property and put a human being inside it, because they bring their friends, they bring their pets, and they bring their family members who just got out of prison and want to operate a tattoo parlor out of the living room. I mean, I know this firsthand because this is what happened to me when I was in the long-term rental business. And the short-term rental business is slightly different because, I mean, first of all, if we're just doing kind of a napkin pitch and you're looking at a 3-bedroom, 2-bath on the short-term rental side and a 3-bedroom, 2-bath on the long-term rental side, in any market, let's just use simple numbers, right? If you're going to rent that, and again, these aren't market condition numbers. These are simple numbers for the purposes of illustration. So let's say $1,000 a month is what you rent out a long-term rental for. 12 months out of the year, that's $12,000. That's the maximum you can earn per year. And then you've got to deduct from that all of your expenses and taxes and insurance and all that. But now let's just take on the short-term rental side, and let's just say $300 a night times $165 a night. I mean, that's $49,500 at a 60% vacancy rate. And that's primarily the number one reason why a lot of people got out of or were afraid to get into the short-term rental business, is because they're like, this model has a 60% vacancy rate. But I told them, way back then 17 years ago, when I got started in this industry, I was dragging people into the asset class because they're like, look, I've never heard of this. I don't know what's going on. It's the 60% vacancy rate. And I was like, well, that's a good thing for you, because you're actually able to earn over 3.5 times what you would earn on a long-term rental side. And you've got all that space available. And there's not a human being in your property for that matter. And on the short-term rental side, when a human being is in your property, half the time they're sleeping, and the other half of the time they're actually gone on attractions or hanging out around town doing vacation stuff. And the coolest thing about the short-term rental asset class is that you get paid up front. So you're no longer chasing down late rent or having to, get chased off with a baseball bat like I did when I started my long-term rental career. And so anybody who lives in a second home destination or a major metro near a hospital that has, properties that are available for that short-term rental, which basically means 30 days or less, doesn't have to be a vacation rental. It literally can be a short-term rental, like you're going to visit a family member or take a family member up to a hospital that's got some treatments, or maybe you're going to visit a college kid, or maybe to go see a sports game. There's a lot of reasons why major metros are good places to stay in a short-term rental. So I would say that that's kind of really the largest brush stroke for reasons why people jump into it fast. And again, because you really don't have to do a ton of marketing. You just kind of put the property up on the established marketing platforms and start making money.
I love it. Yeah. So you're saying that no matter what kind of real estate you do, there will be headaches because you're dealing with people. But in your experience, you found that the upside outweighs the downside as far as short-term rentals. And it seems just more exciting, more glamorous, right? You list it on a website and you deck it out because you make it, like you said earlier, you make it kind of set up that the way you would want it when you go on vacation or you visit that metro area. And so what do you think people get wrong with their VRBOs, with their Airbnbs, with their short-term rentals? Like, are there any like mistakes you see that just aren't talked about very much that just drive you crazy?
Yeah, so that's actually fabulous question. So the thing that most people get wrong is they don't realize that you have to be a host, right? You're not just a real estate investor. With the long-term rental, and by the time you get somebody in there, you can kind of sort of set it and forget it, as long as there's, nothing goes wrong with repairs or something like that. As long as your HVAC is good, your renter, hopefully you're never going to hear from your renter. But in the short-term rental world, sometimes there is a little bit more handholding because people love the relationship. In a way, they're kind of dependent on you to some extent. And people don't expect that. But, from having lived in a second home destination my entire life, all my friends, when they come to Branson, whether I own real estate or not, they're like, hey, what shows should I see? Or what should I go do when I come to Branson? So really, all you need to do is keep just like a Google Doc or something like that super handy, so that when somebody says, hey, we've paid, what's our code? And then you just send them an automated email with a code and some great things to do in Branson. It's just customer service. It's just something that you would want when you go stay somewhere. And I think a lot of people don't see it that way. They don't see it as these people coming to town to have a good time. They just kind of see them as renters, but they're not. They're guests, and you're a host. And what you can do um, to the things that you can do to enhance that guest experience as a good host is really going to set you apart. Usually when I'm in a room speaking to investors, I'll ask everybody in the room, hey, how many of you own own short-term rentals? And I would say about 10% of the room raises their hand, and that's gotten a little bit more over time in the past 10 years or so. And then I ask them, how many of you actually go on vacation? And 100% of the room raises the hand. So I'm thinking, all of you understand the power of short-term rental, but none of us are really using it. Like, for example, here's another kind of a shoot from the hip example. Like, if you were going to go to Disney and stay at a Disney resort, and you were going to stay there for a week and get the all-inclusive package, you're looking at probably $3,000 to $4,000, with tickets and everything like that, just for 1 week stay at Disney. And then how much is your mortgage per month? It's probably somewhere around 25% of that. So there's just a basic shoot from the hip illustration to show you how much money we're willing to pay for something on a temporary basis. It's the same with rental cars and anything we rent. It makes sense to be able to rent it. And so a lot of people actually don't even factor that in when they buy a short-term rental, the amount of money that they would have spent on some vacation to that destination. I mean, that's cash back in your hand, except now you're building equity. And I also want to just shoot off on a tangent here while I can, is that I've seen so many coaches and trainers and online digital marketers sell the Airbnb arbitrage experience. This is where somebody basically is in control of a contract. You rent a long-term rental and then you sublease it to short-term rentals. So you're making money off the spread, but you don't own the underlying asset. And I would think for anybody that's gotten into arbitrage for the past 10 years, basically you're renting an income stream is what you're doing. You don't own any underlying assets. But the largest builder of wealth that I've seen for the middle class American is people that have gotten into the short-term rental business sometime in the last 10 years, because we've seen net worth skyrocket simply because people own the underlying asset. And anybody who's out there teaching somebody to go through the work and the experience of short-term rentals and the extra time that it takes to do has done somebody a disservice, because that underlying asset has been the biggest driver of my wealth and the wealth of the hundreds of people that I brought into the industry for the past decade. And if you're going to do the work, you might as well own the asset, I'd say.
Right, and it's a lot less risky and scary and kind of the long term, and you have more choices, right? If you decide to not do it, you can sell it versus kind of just being stuck in this money situation, just like shaving off little percentage points. And so I love that mindset you have there of the customer service sort of sequence. And this has been like these last few months, especially this kind of mindset has been on my mind. Like, okay, well, it's tempting to say, I'm just here taking orders, and why don't people come to me? Like, even in your business, right? Even in entrepreneurship, saying like, oh, well, I just want traffic. I want to convert to sales. But then if that's hit or miss, or you say, how can I make this consistent or better or up my game? Then you think in these terms of, okay, what's that customer experience like? And what is that kind of process map like? And where are they at? So when they rent your Airbnb, do you send them a welcome message? Do you tell them about the code? Do you list about the shows to see in Branson, Missouri? And it's unnatural for me to think in those terms, but once I kind of like do the mental work on it and I get like a written plan written down, then I can look at it over time and say, hey, well, maybe we can update this list every now and then, or figure out like a better sequence, or figure out just a way for them to be better taken care of. That way they have a better experience. And so I know we don't have all the time to get into all sorts of the nitty gritty details, but do you have like a favorite platform of choice as far as like a Airbnb, or as out of all of the possibilities, as far as like you mentioned things like you can be on the beach or a house or a condo, do you have a preferred type of real estate that you like to rent out on a short-term rental?
Yeah, I would say that one of the things that we're pioneering right now, uh, because I've always been a pioneer in the short-term rental industry. And so originally Airbnb didn't have a ton of market share. Like back when it first came out. Keep in mind, I've been doing this since 2006. Airbnb came around 2009. So HomeAway.com, or Vrbo, as most people know it now, was the largest place to go for people who were in second home destinations. And Airbnb was primarily for like major urban destinations, New York, San Francisco. But Airbnb certainly has captured quite a bit of market share now that Expedia has purchased the HomeAway suite. And I would say that all of them are trending towards um, disaster. I think that Airbnb and VRBO and Booking.com, a lot of them have forgotten who their customer is. And Airbnb especially feels like that they're gearing everything towards the customer. They feel like they're an online travel platform. And so they serve the guest, they serve the traveler. But the problem is Airbnb doesn't own any of the properties. They're starting to purchase properties now because I feel like they see the holes in their plan. But if everybody were to just get fed up and leave the platform, all their travelers would have no place to stay. So, and it used to be in the industry, me as a host and you as a guest would have the ability to interact through the platform. And I could make sure through the platform, we would just exchange phone numbers and then we would become buddies because you would rebook the property through me and it would be great. And I would get to help you and understand you. We've met so many tremendous people in our lives just through renting our second home in Branson. And the problem is that over time, greed kind of spills into the system on both sides and it makes it worse for both. So if what happened was a lot of greedy hosts were like, well, I'll just connect with you and we don't need Airbnb next time. So let me get your contact info. Or maybe you connected with me through the platform and we're like, hey, let's go off platform and let's do a deal on the side. Well, that's not really fair or ethical. So Airbnb and VRBO had to put measures in place that wouldn't happen. But what happens is now there's a massive disconnect in the speed and the personalization that the guest and the host experience. And so because of that, the whole industry is starting to become a bit detached and fragmented. So like, for example, you go to Motel 6, you know what to expect. You go to the Hilton and you know what to expect. But if you rent a VRBO from somebody, you have reviews that you can read, but that's it. That person may not even own that property anymore. They may have transferred the reviews to the new owner. So there's complete fragmentation. So we're going to see a rise of branded short-term rentals coming up, in the near future. And I think overall, to answer your question, the best thing that a person could do is to build their own booking and marketing platform and to establish a brand so ridiculously good that people look for it regardless of the city that they're in. And, one great example of that is a past client of mine. And you can go to like bethsbreakaways.com and she owns and manages a handful of short-term rentals for people kind of in the Branson area. And she takes care of her people so well that people come back and they get the repeat business. I mean, you've got to think of this investment like any other type of business. You start, you learn it, you figure out how to acquire your customer, how to turn your customer into a raving fan so that you never have to go acquire customers anymore because you just have a steady stream of repeat business. And I think a lot of people don't approach the short-term rental model that way. I feel like they approach it as just a crackerjack real estate investment, and it's not easy. But I would say it's the highest paid part-time job you'll ever have.
Fantastic. And you hear about these similar sort of life cycles with the gig economy happening with the Apple App Store, with Uber, with freelancing sites. It seems to be the same story no matter what the platform. It's that these platforms, at first, they're up and coming and they treat the service provider, that middle layer, really well. But then as they get really big, then it seems like the platform, whatever it is, ends up then preferencing the customer and kind of screwing over the Uber drivers, screwing over the app creators, and then it kind of turns into this kind of frame of mind of like, okay, well, am I a business owner or am I an Airbnb biz op person? And you're saying it's better to kind of keep your options open and to, if you can, have the ability to have your own marketing and branding and all these other things. That way, if you're tired of the way that whatever platform is treating you, then you have your own reviews and you have your own maybe website for your rentals, which is easy enough and cost effective enough to do nowadays, and just run a real business, not just something that's temporary. Create something that's potentially turnkey that you can sell, that you can have some other operator take over, but that just is really a good service and really good quality. And it seems simple enough when you say it, but it's easy to see how a lot of people just don't think to apply it. And so you've already told us a little bit of tidbits of some fun stories and adventures that you've been on, but in these last few minutes, do you have a quick sort of scary horror story to make us see, like, what's the worst case scenario that can happen? What's something really bad that happened with you that you recovered from, so that way we feel better afterwards? Anything come to
Oh,
mind?
yeah, great question. I think in the short-term rental industry, it's one of the biggest fears is double booking somebody. Because if you don't have multiple properties, you've got multiple families coming into your one house, and it's a little bit tough. So that was at the time that I realized that we needed multiple properties in the same area, and that actually has helped us in case there was an issue. We could move people if there was some availability. You certainly need to have friends in the industry in case something like that happens. But this was just a rare circumstance in the very first year that I was operating my own short-term rental, and I had double booked it. And I didn't know what to do. It was just a massive shocker, and everything was happening so fast. And I had some friends just up the road that had a bigger property. I had a 4-bedroom, they had a 5-bedroom, and they weren't booked. And I basically just looked at my wife, Kelly, and I said, "What would we want? If this happened to us, how would we want to be treated?" And so I called the people up, and I was completely honest with them. And I said, "Hey, I made a horrible mistake. I've double booked you for 2 of the 4 nights that you have you've booked to stay at my property. But what I've done is I've already found a similar property just 2 doors up, and it's a larger property. It actually has a full basement with a game room, and it just means you're going to have to book into that property for 2 nights and then move your stuff for the last 2 nights. And I'm actually going to go ahead and give you a $100 gift certificate to a restaurant just so that just to honor you for your time in doing that." And they loved it. They got a better property for those first 2 nights. They got dinner out, and all they had to do was move their luggage from one place to the next, which kind of was an issue, but I paid the additional price. I didn't charge them any additional rates. I paid the upgrade for that, and I also paid for the additional cleaning fee that was necessary at that 5-bedroom property. So there's always a way out. Where there's a will, there's a way. But that was definitely, I was sweating bullets that night for sure.
But you made it through, and there's always a way out. You can always think creatively in that way. So that's reassuring that, sure, there are going to be those drawbacks, setbacks, those emergencies, but that's just the what you're getting yourself into, right? That if you want a nice, boring, cushy job, then get a job with IBM, but that still might not be safe because you still might get fired. So no matter what, there is risk and stress in your life. So choose your risk and stress, and it's maybe I would say to go for a little bit of a calculated amount of risk and stress, because there's more potential and upside there. And so you have all these other things that you've created. You have Vrolio, you have Myths, Management, and Mastery of Vacation Rentals, and the Cocktails and Dreams Real Estate podcast. So tell us about some next steps. You've come on our show, you've given us a nice sample of what you're all about and what your kind of knowledge and genius are. So what are some next steps here? How can someone find out about your book, podcast, and company? And what are some interesting more tidbits of advice they can find there?
Yeah, if you're an investor or a real estate agent and you want to know more about getting into that short-term rental asset class or starting to work with investors, see, the biggest failure that most real estate agents have is that they focus on transactions rather than focusing on building wealth. Because if you're building wealth as a real estate agent, then people are going to become attracted to you, because at this point you become an investor agent. You become an agent that actually buys real estate, who is eating your own cooking. And the amount of credibility that you have for people who want that, and when you can become a guide to help people increase their net worth, you're far more valuable than a real estate agent who just shows people homes. And that's what I've always trained all my real estate agents. I've trained over 60 plus real estate agents to be able to be first, um, world-class real estate agents, and then second, investor-friendly agents, and then third, investor agents, where they're actually increasing their net worth. And then fourth, we teach them leadership so they can grow into a team lead and actually automate that pillar of income for themselves. And so that's primarily how we meet people, and we love to work with investors and help get them started. I've turned real estate agents that were waiters into the top producing team leads in their market. I've turned real estate investors who bought one property into real estate developers in less than 5 years, just because we're so incredibly enthusiastic about helping move people through those. And my book is the great place to start. It's a class and a book, and it's written at a fourth grade level because that was the most intelligent level I could write it at. And so it's an easy read. And basically, you can follow some of those journeys of people who have gone through those processes on my podcast, Cocktails and Dreams. So people who moved from, hey, I wanted it to now I have it, or people to, hey, I have it and I figured out how to really do it. At every stage of the journey, that's where Cocktails and Dreams comes on. And then, in those processes, you'll also find, because I'm a pioneer in the industry and I always have been, I'm always looking for the newest next thing. And I would say that the way the buyer buys an investment property has completely changed in the past 3 years. So if you're an investor or you're a real estate agent and you're trying to use the old ways of helping somebody buy a property, like, hey, here's a property, here's the comps, here's the historical record of properties. Nobody cares about that anymore. What people care about now is the income, the actual historical income of a property. So people aren't buying so much off of total ROI, they're buying more on cap rate. So they'll say this property has only done this amount of income for the past 2 years. Well, I'm going to, use a cap rate metric on that and extrapolate that. And that's the offer. I don't really care what they're selling for. This is how I can get a return off of my money. And so I bought a data company for short and midterm rentals. And the founder of that company is Erica Muller. She's incredibly intelligent. And so we're kind of combining my training along with her data platform. And we're creating a legendary experience for both investors and real estate agents, appraisers, lenders, anybody who's a real estate professional who wants their opinions to be backed by data and who wants to make smart purchases. So that's the way we're seeing things trend. And those are the things that we've got our hands and feet in. And we're very excited about all of them.
That sounds amazing to adapt to these changes of these last 3 years. And because I mean, it's scary how quickly things can change in that way, and how if we're just being frustrated by trying to make this whole real estate thing work using the old way of thinking and just wondering why it's not working, well, a new strategy is required. And so what are some links, next steps for this? Like, how do we find Vrolio and your book and your podcast?
Absolutely. So Vrolio is, you can go on our website, and it's just vrolio.com. And you can also reach out to, and on Vrolio, we do weekly tech demos. So anybody that wanted to jump in and see a tech demo, they could access that from that site. Or if they're really interested, really excited about it, they can shoot my admin an email, and they can just go to, that's Worley, AC1 @gmail.com, WORLEY, AC1 @gmail.com. You can also contact us through any one of our Facebook sites. That's the Worley Real Estate Network. .com, or any one of our Facebook pages, even through Cocktails and Dreams. If you're like, hey, I don't believe this guy, I want to check out his podcast first, and go ahead and do that, and make sure you have a comfort level, and then reach out to us. We're not hard to find. I think my cell phone number is even online somewhere. I mean, I'm a real estate agent still. I still have a real estate license. So although I'm not practicing, I'm more of a teacher, coach, business leader, but I still have my team that spans 5 states. And so my hands and feet are in that business, and I'm seeing what's happening on Main Street for real estate agents and investors. And I feel like that's what makes us highly effective at Vrolio, just to make sure that we're providing the latest data that's necessary for people to make smart purchases and to become smart agents. So that's how you can connect with us. And of course, my book is available on Amazon. And so just grab a copy.
Very nice. And hearing about your thought process here, it's a good reminder that there's what you do as far as the main business, but then all the extra marketing, it can sometimes be frustrating because there's delayed gratification there, right? When you go on a podcast and you do the social posts, and you do the ads, you do the content and all these other things, it's like sometimes you don't exactly see the return on that, but it's so nice and it pays off to have a podcast and have a book. And so when people do their due diligence research on you, like, okay, am I authority, thought leader, doing what I'm talking about with real estate, you have all these other things working for you that are kind of like, you don't know exactly which thing did the job exactly, or maybe all of it combined, but it's a good reminder of how we all need to be doing like what you're doing, right? Like being on podcasts, having on podcasts, and just like kind of always doing the repetitions and talking about what you do just to get this extra attention, to get people coming to you. And that applies for us having a business, having a short-term rental, all these other areas. Just we have to kind of do that extra little bit of work. And so we mentioned VROLIO.com is the website for that. And then WORLEY realestateenetwork.com. And then we also mentioned that the book is Myths, Management, and Mastery of Vacation Rentals. And the podcast is Cocktails and Dreams Real Estate Podcast. So you have all these ways of checking up on Jeramie. I personally prefer the podcast because you can just tune into one episode and see what he's all about. And then if it makes sense to go to that next step, to go to Vrolio.com, to message him, to text him, to talk to him and his team, then see if that makes sense, because Jeramie is an authority in the short-term rental space, and he can help you if you're either looking to up your game as far as STRs, or you just, like we said at the beginning, if you always had this dream of getting into real estate, but some of the other choices seem kind of scary or weird, short-term real estate, as Jeramie said, is kind of your gateway drug to get excited and to see how it can work with this 60% occupancy rate, and figuring out all these cool things. So as we wrap up, wind down our conversation here, Jeramie, I always like to ask my guest about a quote or lesson that can just really sit with us and be powerful for us. So does anything come to mind when I ask you for a fun quote or lesson?
Yeah. Let's see. I would say that probably I would quote like Sun Tzu in The Art of War. And that is that, the general who makes many calculations before battle has many victories. And so a lot of people, I don't think necessarily do that in real estate. I think a lot of us kind of go off emotion. And I think that even when we're trying to choose a coach, a lot of times we'll go off the emotional sales pitch or whatever it is. And so that's why I agree with you. I think a lot of these podcasts or this evergreen content is really good, because I think people have been burned by a lot of digital marketers in the past. And I've always, I guess, been proud of and complained at the same time that, I'm kind of an all steak, no sizzle guy. So I'm just not going to have all the sizzle out there that's like, oh, this is why you should buy this. I'm like, I'm going to put my content out there. And I've served a lot of people. I've physically watched people move from, being impoverished to now having options in their life and having margin in their life. And my mission hasn't changed. I'm getting a little bit better about starting to record things and put things online a little bit more. It takes a level of courage and confidence to do that, just because, it's like being in junior high again. Everybody wants to, give you their opinion, and sometimes it doesn't always feel good, but I've stopped worrying so much about, what the individual person says, like on a YouTube link or whatever, or what I'm wearing or how shaggy my beard might be. But I've started focusing now on the 500 people that I haven't met yet, that I'm going to meet next month, and really, how can I serve them at the highest level? And that gives me the greatest joy. I really do care about people. I do care about turning dads into better husbands and moms into better wives, people, partners into better partners, just people who want to do more out of their life. And they know that they've been sort of underserved or looked over by, the rest of the world, and they believe that they've got something special that needs to go out there into the world. Then I'll help them do that. I'll help them become the salt and the light that they need to have to be able to go out and make that impact in the world, because we get one go round at it, and you might as well have resources to do it.
Very nice. I love it. Focusing on those 500 people the next 500 people that you'll help who will appreciate you, who will benefit from you. And then there's also that advice in there about sharpening your axe. So very inspiring and motivating. Jeramie Worley, CEO, Vrolio, short-term rental authority, and real estate podcast host. Wonderful speaking with you.
Great speaking with you too, Robert. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show.